Life insurance carriers, distributors, and advisors are under pressure to improve operations and enhance the customer experience. New challenges require new digital technologies that drive fundamental business model changes. Anyone navigating this shift must rethink the technology driving their back office, front office, and customer experience. Equisoft's modern end-to-end life insurance solutions enable the rapid digital transformation required to address such problems without the risk. Specifically designed for the needs of carriers, distributors, and advisors across the value chain, our diverse solutions are transforming the back office with Equisoft Manage, a low-risk production-ready cloud platform built on an industry-leading insurance policy admin system, and Equisoft Centralize, a turbocharged agency management system that streamlines distributor operations. While our front office solutions accelerate sales and improve customer servicing with Equisoft Illustrate, a persuasive illustration and quoting platform. Equisoft Apply, providing streamlined yet flexible digital electronic application, and tools uniquely suited to advisor efficiency like Equisoft Connect, our insurance advisor-specific CRM, Equisoft Plan for an in-depth wealth planning platform, and Equisoft Analyze for Advisors, our comprehensive asset allocation and wealth analysis tool. All flawlessly implemented and supported by our globally proven services group, successful implementations and data migration capabilities, backed by dedicated onshore teams of experts and a multinational roster of clients. The tipping point has been reached. The time to embrace and begin your digital transformation journey is now. Start your modernization with us today.
his points because he said we started from a value proposition. Our strategy began from a value proposition, and that value proposition is that we need to be concerned about, we're in a unique position to be concerned about the health and well-being and the longevity of our clients. In fact, we have a financial outcome of how well and how long people live. Drawing from that conclusion, we need a platform that allows us to engage our clients on a variety of capabilities, wearables, affiliate programs, whole foods, discounts on vegetables and healthy food, the tracking of those, the workings of those affiliate relationships, the earning of credit through the Vitality platform. All of that, I think, is a great example of the insurance company looking for, so to speak, the killer moving toward their lifetime offer. Why, as a policyholder, you may feel very invested in and have a relationship with your insurance company that goes beyond just the product or the policy price. And Brooks has said, look, whatever's going on in the world, and in this case, we were smack dab in the middle of the implications this year for COVID. I think I talked to him in May or June. The platform is an example of the power of having the ability for whatever's happening in the world to stay relevant and current with what's important to our customers' lives. When he was making the point, because they actually took the opportunity to send out COVID masks with the John Hancock Vitality label on. He loves to tell the story that somebody stopped one of their customers on the street and said, "Your insurance company sent to you COVID? That's wonderful," right? Making the point for their vested interest in their customers' health and well-being. All right, key takeaways, hopefully. And then we have opportunity for question and answers. So I hope you're thinking of a few things that we could actively talk about. I'm making the point that experience and engagement are different things, and engagement is much broader from a brand, loyalty, and trust perspective than experience. Experience is important. Without experience, you won't have engagement. However, experience alone, if we talk about it in isolation with respect to automation and digitization, we risk a siloed view from our customers' point of view of our organization. So the engagement considerations have to flow from a strategy. What is your value proposition? And we've talked to many clients in a variety of lines of business, and that value proposition will differ depending on the kinds of clients, the sophistication of the requirements, important dimensions of these features. Great experiences possible in engagement. I don't know if I'm totally answering your question, but again, I think they have to be part and parcel of the value proposition. Good questions.
Thank you. For legacy life insurance companies, how should we apportion our investment budgets between value chain automation of existing products and channels in the way which we do business today versus the private, commercial, and engaged community type of product solutions that we will in the future? Because on one hand, we know about what we will pay is not going to be wanted by clients in the future. But we feel we need it. Modernize, really, rolling, old business that we got because that feels like it needs to be done. It's really 40, 50, 60, 70% of the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe show us future clients and one of the things that we will pay. What do you guys say?
Yeah, so you're asking, well, we have real demands right now with servicing producers, customers, with steps along the value chain that need to be automated, that need to be digital, and that require business cases we probably already established for efficiency targets. And I think you absolutely have to continue on that journey. I think also there will be learnings that come out of those investments will support more strategic considerations for whatever the next phase is going to be. But I think it's equally important that you at least not have blinders on and recognize, look, this may be a shorter term fix. We may have an experience issue that does not accommodate a seamless experience across channels. I think just having that awareness and having a plan to deal with that restriction is important.
Have you data highlighted any differences in which you might want to refer to, say, a term life policy or a full life risk life consumer versus a whole life policy where you want to life?
I think I understand the question. Yeah, a term and simple products, dictate lower costs, dictate lower touch. And several of our clients have made that clear and pursue servicing and acquisition strategies that have them not touch the process unless they have to intervene to preserve the sale. At least one of our clients has studied this, however, and said that they understand that the cohort they're selling to actually prefers a no-touch experience. So I forget who asked the question, how do we balance, is this what consumers want? Several carriers are absolutely studying that question, and they know to whom they're digitally targeting the kinds of experience and or engagement that they're designing. And to directly answer your question, in at least one carrier's case, they expect to sell to those who want and expect. In fact, they don't want a phone call. They don't want to talk to an agent unless something dramatic separate entity, probably with a distinct culture, maybe with a unique brand, with resources in it, who are willing to take some risk. And they decided that a separate greenfield approach is what's required in order to drive the level of innovation to achieve some of the things we're talking about. Others have decided that a hybrid approach, i.e. we will partner with somebody who will bring innovation to the level we need it, and maybe even bring important components of the platform to us, so that we can begin to offer the kinds of experiences and maybe engagement that we think is strategically important. I will say even fewer that I'm aware of. I said, we're strictly going to work within, the four walls that were existing in common organization. So most are turning to some kind of partnerships, and or making the decision that a separate entity charged with, an entrepreneurial set of goals is the best way to do it. Okay, well, again, I hope this tees up a productive set of additional sessions. Again, I was hoping to be provocative, not too provocative. I hope this helped you think through some of the things that we've been thinking deeply about and trying to help our clients. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate all of your dedication and Dan, your expertise. We've done our Q&A. Wanted to give you a couple more bits of information before we start our next session. Please stop by the Microsoft booth, or booth 223. We've got experts to talk about your transformation projects, and you can enter to win a trip to the next year's Formula One Grand Prix in Montreal. So please stop by. For you auto enthusiasts, exciting trip. We'll love to see your faces. Please stick around.
Life insurance carriers, distributors, and advisors are under pressure to improve operations and enhance the customer experience. New challenges require new digital technologies that drive fundamental business model changes. Anyone navigating this shift must rethink the technology driving their back office, front office, and customer experience. Equisoft's modern end-to-end life insurance solutions enable the rapid digital transformation required to address such problems without the risk. Specifically designed for the needs of carriers, distributors, and advisors across the value chain, our diverse solutions are transforming the back office with Equisoft Manage, a low-risk production-ready cloud platform built on an industry-leading insurance policy admin system, and Equisoft Centralize, a turbocharged agency management system that streamlines distributor operations. While our front office solutions accelerate sales and improve customer servicing with Equisoft Illustrate, a persuasive illustration and quoting platform, Equisoft Apply, providing streamlined yet flexible digital electronic application, and tools uniquely suited to advisor efficiency like Equisoft Connect, our insurance advisor-specific CRM, Equisoft Plan for an in-depth wealth planning platform, and Equisoft Analyze for Advisors, our comprehensive asset allocation and wealth analysis tool. all flawlessly implemented and supported by our globally proven services group, successful implementations and data migration capabilities, backed by dedicated onshore teams of experts and a multinational roster of clients. The tipping point has been reached. The time to embrace and begin your digital transformation journey is now. Start your modernization with us today.
So, most insurance companies don't have just one illustration system. And true to form, we found out that the average number of illustration systems is about 2.5. It's probably more 3 or 2. But for the most part, there's an illustration system that might be used for just annuities. There's another one that might be used for protection products. Depending on the type of protection product, if it's variable and uses funds or something like that, that might be a different illustration system. Sometimes there's an illustration system that they can use that is going to allow for multi-illustrations, that an agent can go in and look for many illustrations at once. So the average is, like I said, about 2.5. The average age of those systems is really interesting because it's about 8 to 10 years old. So we do have new clients for these vendors who answered the surveys, but we also have some clients who have been using that vendor's illustration system for 20 years. We do ask a question that I think is really interesting, and we ask about their future plans. So when we break down how they responded about their future plans, more than half of them said they want to keep things as they are, which suggests they're just going to maintain or enhance their existing systems. While 28% are going to consolidate down to one vendor, and typically the vendor that they were answering about. And another 12% said they were going to consolidate down to 2 or 3 systems, which means they're above the average. But interestingly, in our CIO report that we run every year, we also ask about investment priorities of these are insurers who may not have answered or may have answered our illustration customer feedback report. And 1/4 of the CIOs who answered our survey for their pressures and priorities said they were planning investments in illustrations this year.
So user experience has always been a big factor and an area where we spend a lot of time at Equisoft, whether it's through our partners or even within our own teams. So this illustration tool that we have and that we worked hard with our partners to build it's really good for your super user agents with a lot of specialized experience around the product. So you need to understand that, yes, it's for someone that uses it a lot, but it also very specialized in the types of insurance products. So your term quoting and illustration will be completely different than a universal life or a fixed index annuity or a guaranteed income fund or a strategy. So it's extremely important when we talk about user experience in that context to always remind ourselves how can we adjust this and optimize that for that particular kind of product line and type of insurance product. I'd add to that as well. It's important to have good partners to make this happen. I mean, we could not have done that in a vacuum in our behind the curtain. You really need to have a way to engage and bring some communities of advisors. So we had great partnership with some carriers to work with this and make this the best user experience, basically with constant feedback and a lot of thought behind every single button and every single validation.
The thing that they need to focus on, and I do think they talk about it, but acting upon the talk is always harder, is we serve tier 2 through 5 clients. Think of it as small to mid-sized ones. And they're not going to be able to compete across the board on every dimension with large-scale players, particularly as these large-scale players create branded small players that are well-staffed and resourced for the job. And so what they need to talk about is, where do I want to compete? Where will I do the digitalization? Am I prepared through having an appropriate policy administration system or front office technologies to have a distinctive offer that makes me attractive in a unique way? And that's a tough thing, because it means that you have to tell someone representing some function in the company that they're going to have average stuff, and that in another part of the company, that's where we're putting our bet on being different and seeking partners that can make us more effective differently.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So there are a couple of things I think that fit into that category. One is that we are living in a period when we're facing some pretty significant demographic changes in both the United States and Canada. Today, we live in a world where we have almost approached the point where millennials as a generation will represent half the labor force. That will actually occur in 2020 in the United States. But what is another data point that I think is missing is that number is projected to rise to 75% by the year 2025. And if you unpack those numbers, what you find is that my generation, I'm a card-carrying baby boomer, but a younger member of that generation, the birth rate actually was not consistent across the entirety of the generation. The peak birth year actually was 1949, which means that those individuals today are 70. Beginning in 1958, so people who are roughly 60 today, the birth rate started to fall rather precipitously. And so by 1962, the birth year, the birth rate was actually down in the United States to what it was before World War II, so effectively Depression era levels. So that means that you see a relatively rapid transition of baby boomers out of the labor force and a reduction of their percentage, and that means, of course, that millennials, as the largest living generation, rise in that space. So that's a very interesting mathematical problem, but the reality is that it actually means for insurance companies, they need to start thinking very differently about the kinds of products and services that they're going to offer in the future, because the individuals in that generation are not necessarily going to be looking for the same kinds of things that their older siblings or their parents did. So I think that's a fundamental issue. Related to that is the impact that that has on the labor market itself. Baby boomers and older Gen Xers had a tendency to stay in positions for extended periods of time. Millennials have a tendency to think about their career as made up of a series of job engagements or tours of duty, if you will, that may last 3 or 4 or 5 years. And they've learned that in order to manage risk on their end, it's to their advantage to think about their career as those tours of duty. That has all kinds of implications for how people manage technology, how they manage the intellectual property inside of companies. And I think carriers have not yet really fully recognized what they need to do in order to be able to manage that human capital for themselves. I think another thing that they're just now beginning to come to grips with is this notion of the idea that the useful life of technology is becoming ever shorter, right? And it's not that the technology, modern technology, isn't great, but it just is that the new technology makes things go out of phase, out of style, out of capability relatively quickly. And so we're going to live in a world where things that are 30 or 40 years old may actually have a pretty significant useful life in front of them, where things that we bought relatively recently don't. And so there's a bifurcation of the thought process around how you manage technology. And that has implications on the accounting side, because no longer can you think about buying something and then depreciating it for a particularly long period of time, 7 years, maybe longer in some cases, because it doesn't have a useful life anything like that. So it needs to force companies to think differently and move more towards an OpEx model rather than a CapEx model. That's a fundamental shift, not in technology, but in the thought process that's internal to how carriers manage themselves. And so one of the things that we encourage our clients, typically the CIOs, the IT leaders in organizations, is to work very carefully and closely with their financial counterparts, because this isn't a pivot that you can make quickly. It is something that you need to make very deliberately, methodically, cooperatively, because it will fundamentally change how you manage organizations. And I think that realization is beginning to come through to companies, but I think they're going to need to have that realization much more quickly than they otherwise would, because it has a significant impact on the investments that they're making today.
Life insurance carriers, distributors, and advisors are under pressure to improve operations and enhance the customer experience. New challenges require new digital technologies that drive fundamental business model changes. Anyone navigating this shift must rethink the technology driving their back office, front office, and customer experience. Equisoft's modern end-to-end life insurance solutions enable the rapid digital transformation required to address such problems without the risk. Specifically designed for the needs of carriers, distributors, and advisors across the value chain, our diverse solutions are transforming the back office with Equisoft Manage, a low-risk production-ready cloud platform built on an industry-leading insurance policy admin system, and Equisoft Centralize, a turbocharged agency management system that streamlines distributor operations. While our front office solutions accelerate sales and improve customer servicing with Equisoft Illustrate, a persuasive illustration and quoting platform. Equisoft Apply, providing streamlined yet flexible digital electronic application, and tools uniquely suited to advisor efficiency like Equisoft Connect, our insurance advisor-specific CRM, Equisoft Plan for an in-depth wealth planning platform, and Equisoft Analyze for Advisors, our comprehensive asset allocation and wealth analysis tool. All flawlessly implemented and supported by our globally proven services group, successful implementations and data migration capabilities, backed by dedicated onshore teams of experts and a multinational roster of clients. The tipping point has been reached. The time to embrace and begin your digital transformation journey is now. Start your modernization with us today.
So, most insurance companies don't have just one illustration system. And true to form, we found out that the average number of illustration systems is about 2.5. It's probably more 3 or 2, but for the most part, there's an illustration system that might be used for just annuities. There's another one that might be used for protection products. Depending on the type of protection product, if it's variable and uses funds or something like that, that might be a different illustration system. Sometimes there's an illustration system that they can use that is going to allow for multi-illustrations, that an agent can go in and look for many illustrations at once. So the average is, like I said, about 2.5.
Sacavell, Vice President and CIO of Limra and Loma. He is joining us remotely. We've got Raj Ramani, Partner, America's Customer and Growth Leader at EY. And we've got Satish Krishnan, Vice President, Account Management at Equisoft. Melanie Henderson, unfortunately, was not able to join. She had a bit of an emergency, so she is not joining. So we're one panelist down, but I think we can make up for it with the folks that we have here today and any great questions from the audience. So I encourage you to raise your hands and challenge us. I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves real quick before we get into our session. So Kartik, maybe you can kick us off and give a little introduction for you.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So thank you all for having me on this distinguished panel. I hope things are okay with Melanie. And thank you to my Equisoft friends for bringing such a crucial topic at the forefront at ITC. Thank you to the Mandalay Bay for hosting the event, and to the staff. I mentioned it earlier to our friends on in the conference. It's not easy working a conference, right? And it's certainly not easy when you have someone like me, hybrid and remote. So happy to be here. My name is Kartik Saxaval. I serve as Vice President and Global Chief Information Officer for LIMRA Loma LL Global. We are the world's largest and oldest nonprofit trade association, working across the world with 1,400 members across 71 countries, focused on life insurance and annuities, group and worksite benefits, and retirement. I just recently completed my 4 amazing years with the association, and my insurance industry experience dates back to Liberty Mutual, where I was for about 10 years, multiple roles across multiple lines. It's a pleasure being with you. I am here virtually this year, coming to you live from Dover, New Hampshire, here on the Eastern Seaboard. And since I am the only presenter up on this panel that is virtual, I want to give everybody the obligatory heads up that if you hear a dog barking in the background, losing its mind, it's probably another dozen boxes from Amazon Prime. So it's not you, it's me.
Thanks, Kartik. Rob, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Always tough following Kartik, but I want to thank Equisoft for having me on this panel. My name is Raj Ramani. I'm a partner from Ernst & Young out of the New York office, responsible for what we call our customer and growth offering, and that's really around front office. So think about marketing, distribution, customer contact, customer experience, which we will probably call engagement going forward, and new product innovation. So I spent my entire career in financial services, first half in banking, second half really on the insurance side, and I focus across the different parts with P&C, life, and reinsurance. But very excited to be here today on this panel and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. And Satish?
Thank you, Val. Satish Krishnan. I head up the U.S. accounts for Equisoft. Been in the industry 20 plus years, do not want to date myself. Started my career 25 years ago in the insurance, the carrier side of the business, both from an operations and IT perspective, but spent most of my life providing solutions to insurance carriers in terms of policy admin or digital solutions. Look forward to this discussion. I think Dan had really set the path for us to talk about customer experience, so looking forward to a good discussion.
Great. So we're going to break today's session and panel into 3 phases. So we're going to start with initial engagement. I personally, I'm in sales support, so I'm working with new carriers, doing demos and presentations all the time. I have to say, all of this is super relevant, so I'm really excited to hear what comes out of today and some of the ideas that we discuss. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with phase 1, initial engagement. So this is really, the marketing and uncovering the needs. So how do you get the attention of those consumers? And as Dan mentioned, there's all sorts of new mechanisms and ways that those consumers are looking to, how do I know that I need insurance? Maybe I don't want to work with an advisor. So we're going to delve into that. The marketing and discovery phases of the policy lifecycle are so important because they really set the tone for the client's relationship to the organization going forward. And a truer statement couldn't be told. Streamlining the amount of time and effort required from the consumer and delivering value in the form of education about their needs and potential solutions is critical to building a foundation for a long-term relationship. So really, how do we gather and get their attention and get them to then purchase and buy? And how do they know what they need and how to move forward in that process? So we're going to kick this off to Kartik. What are the key CX challenges and opportunities that carriers need to think through when a potential customer is first engaged, either by an advisor or through a direct digital solution?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. First off, I do agree with Satish. Dan was just phenomenal, right? What a way to kick off a workshop on customer experience. I've always been enriched by every conversation I've had with him, so thank you, Dan. So great question. Let's level set, right? First off, we need to give our industry holistically a ton of credit, right? We have done a ton of work over the past several years in doubling down on thrusting CX to the forefront of industry opportunities that we need to go after. I mean, this workshop is prime example of that. The flip side to that, though, right? The other side of the coin is we've not done so great in terms of relative scale in the past, right? And we've kind of taken the adage, or that insurance is bought and not is sold and not bought, and we've taken the industry and intertwined everything around that self-deprecating, bemoaning archetype, right? And built an entire industry around it. So there is that. So second, a few years ago, when we started talking about digital, and we started talking about the rise of robo-advisors, the natural question came up, as it always does, when we talk about technology disintermediating a line of business. Is it digital or is it human, right? So, and my response to that, the answer is both. The answer is both. This is not a binary choice, right? So regardless of how sophisticated digital prospecting, digital selling, and engagement gets, we cannot underestimate how crucial agents and advisors are today and shall continue to be over the next several years, right? People want to continue receiving sound financial advice from other people, right? They might leverage digital instruments for many things, simpler things, engagement activity, but they rely on that inherent trust and that human-to-human relationship, right? And I think that is probably not going to change dramatically. Now, secondly, in my opinion, the challenges and opportunities are relatively identical for delivering on the promise of exemplary customer experience, right? If you want to keep your customer or your prospect in a digital setting or otherwise, my opinion, you just need to remember the word keep, right? KEEP, and I'm an IT guy. We come up with acronyms, so keep is my acronym as well. So first one is knowledge. Know your customer, right? Know your customer, whether it is via digital means and analytics that we collect, or when you sit down across the table from a potential customer, a prospect. Know your customer, and it's not because we want to sell somebody more stuff, right? It's not because we want to sell them more stuff. It's because you can use this knowledge to deliver on the obligations. As an industry, we have obligations to our customers, right? It's the right product to the right people at the right time. So number one, know your customer. Number two, the first E is empathize. Knowledge of the customer, I think, is one part of the equation. Don't just know them, understand them. Understand the customer and understand where they are in their life cycle, right? In their life. What is it that they're trying to accomplish, and how we can help them get to their goals. This is a little bit trickier in a digital setting, right? But obviously it's not impossible thanks to analytics and AI. The third E I would add is engage. So provide engagement through digital means such as IoT, a focus on health and wellness, or even face-to-face interactions when we're talking about agents, right? So engagement is critical and key once the sale is complete. I was taking notes as I usually do when Dan speaks, and Dan talked about John Hancock, the Vitality Program, and Brooks Tingle. Mr. Tingle is on our board of directors for Limra Loma LL Global, and Dan, just about the time when you interviewed him, I interviewed him for the Limra Life Insurance Conference. I think it was around April. And it was fascinating, right? It was such an insightful interview, primarily because I learned a lot more about the Vitality Program in terms of engagement. Do you realize, thanks to Vitality, John Hancock now has 40 engagements, 40 touch points with their customers on a monthly basis, 40 interactions. I mean, that's pretty phenomenal, right? And Hancock Vitality is definitely the most well-known, but I know most of the industry is looking to focus and lean in on maximization of that engagement. And the last thing is the P in keep, right? Is preferences. Provide our customers with this omni-channel experience and engage them through these multiple channels: digital, web, IoT, robo-advisors, face-to-face. at some point, once you understand your customer, you will understand the way they want to be engaged. Someone who's a Gen X or a millennial won't necessarily want to engage with the way that a Gen Zer would, right? So you need to be able to tailor your offering and engage with your customers and meet them where they are. So if you want to keep the customer or prospect, keep them happy, engaged, just remember, keep knowledge, empathy, engagement, and preferences. So digital or human, that's always the age-old question when we talk about CX. Like with Dan's son-in-law's Peloton example, right? CX is not making sure your customers remember your product. Like he said, people don't remember you're stepping on a recumbent bike, right? CX is not about making sure your customers remember your product. CX is about making sure your customers remember how you make them feel by virtue of your product, right? So it's a little bit of a long-winded response, but I think the answer is both. It's not a binary. It's not digital or human. I think the answer is both. Digital can learn a lot more from the human interaction, and humans can certainly learn from digital interactions in terms of how you can engage with your customer and provide that snappy, quick performance and turnaround.
Excellent, thanks. Anybody from our panel here?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Karthik said, but I think the main point that I walk away with in any customer engagement is the first time you have a customer in front of you, that sets the stage for the rest of the history for that client. Yep. So it is critical that first interaction is the best interaction that you have, and everything else is excusable down the road as you make mistakes, right? So I do totally agree that we do, as insurance carriers, need to be flexible. We need to know our clients. We need to know how to interact with them. Each of them have their own little nuances in how they want to engage. I'm totally bought into that, and it is important that today, if you look at the consumer, they have very little patience. I mean, they have so many other alternatives to look into. So why, you talk about, Dan talked about vitality. That's a great thing. I think product is the first thing that comes to play. I mean, it's not just simple traditional products that we sold for the last 30 years. I think these products are more sophisticated today. They actually align with the lifestyle of that consumer today. So if that product doesn't align to that, you already are, on your back heel at that point. So as insurance carriers, we have to look at what's that product that is going to sell and that makes some meaning to them, right? That gets them into the door. The rest of it is how you service that business and how you take that forward. And that sets the stage for it. So totally on board on that.
I completely agree with the comments. Two things I'd add, especially in that first encounter with the customer. Empathy and trust, right, are two elements that cannot be overlooked. We're in an industry where it's difficult to understand products. To Stisha's point, they haven't changed, but it doesn't mean that everyone understands them. Yeah. And so how do you establish the empathy part, listen to what the customer's really trying to gain? And here's where it gets tough. What if they're coming online? What if they're coming through one of the omni-channels we talk about? Well, how are you going to listen in that equation? So this is where we look at, and we'll have a discussion around technology, you have to look at the different ways that you can establish that. Trust is a very loaded one, right? You start to look at the information that's out there, the information that you need to underwrite, the information that you want to establish. How do you get that trust factor going? How do they feel comfortable giving you information? Are you protected? It's introduced a whole slew of stuff that you have to figure out as an organization. Cyber is a big one, right? So like if I give you all my information, is it protected, not protected? Where's this going to go? So all that may seem trivial, but that first interaction with that customer sets the stage for how they'll operate and interact with you going forward. So it's key that you establish that right out of the gate.
Excellent. Important first phase. We can move on to phase 2, which would be policy application. The process of completing and submitting an application through to issuance or decline has come under intense scrutiny recently. Advancements in technology and data management have created the opportunity to accelerate policy onboarding, but the overall client experience is not always as good as consumers have come to expect. Raj, maybe you can take this one. With that in mind, can you describe some of the specific challenges carriers face when trying to create great customer experience during the application process?
No, it's a great point, right? You look at it, we're not lacking technology, we're not lacking data. It's all out there. It's a question of how do we use it? How do companies use it? Like how can you benefit? So if you look at the application process and you kind of break it into a couple categories, we talked about the first one, right? And hyper-personalization is a term that you're going to hear more and more, and it's different than personalization. Personalization was static information that you had on a person and you understood their profile and you made decisions and judgments based off that. Hyper-personalization starts to get into really understanding real time with data and insights and AI, what are the things that you need to know about that customer and how do you help them through that application process. Their early onset of getting through that process is going to be absolutely critical. Now, once they're in that process, you look at it, and it's debatable on how long an application takes, but let's just say it's anywhere between 3 to 8 weeks of process to get an actual end-to-end complete. What does that process experience look like, right? You start to look at, the information that they have. How much information do they have to provide? How much information do they have to repeat? How much information did you pull from third party, from your own internal to actually populate some of this and make it easier for them along the way? So you start to look at that component of it. It's going to be essential that they have a seamless and really interaction, whether it's the advisor, the agent, the end customer, whoever that is, really needs to have a real experience through that. And the final thing I'd say about the application process is really the tracking. Right? It can get frustrating to say, where are we with this thing? And what typically customers start to do is they call the call centers, they call whoever and say, where are we with this stuff? I don't understand. And the expectation is set. No matter what other industry you look at, you can look at Amazon and there you can go look at tracking, where your packages are. You can look at Domino's and figure out where the pizza is in the chain of the pizza tracker. But our industry, it's a mystery, right? Like, where is it in the process? And it's very difficult for our customers to understand that. And it gets very challenging. And the most frustrating thing in that application process that, I think is low-hanging fruit, but we still do it, is we wait for the fifth screen to ask them the knockout question. Like, why is that not on the first question that comes on there and say, you know what, you're in this industry or this sector or this, we can't do this, but here's what we can give you. That's not there. We wait through the whole process, and typically what happens after that, after they get knocked out, is they're done, right? They're off, and they're either going to go use someone else, but from everything I talked about earlier on empathy and trust, you've already broken it, right? So you start to look at it and say, they're going to be looking elsewhere.
I just pile on really quickly. What other product do we know of, like a digital product, that actually makes it difficult for their customers to complete that engagement, right? It's mind-boggling. So I think we talked a little bit about this frictionless and lucid experience. Just think about the life insurance contract, and I've been railing against life insurance contracts for a little bit, but they are complicated. They are not easy to understand. They are not easy to consume. And I guarantee, when's the last time anybody read it, right? It's like the iTunes contract. You scroll, and click accept. But this is something significantly more important than the iTunes contract, right? How are we going to make it easier for our customers to do business with us? Think about what's going to happen in the next 10 years, Raj, right? When you have the majority of the buying population being the younger end of the millennials and Gen Z. We're trying to serve up Moby Dick to a TikTok universe. It's not going to work, right? We need to rethink our entire engagement strategy as an industry and not just firm by firm.
Yeah, and the one other thing I think we got to keep in mind, when we talk about application process, there's two stakeholders in this all the time. You have the agent and you have the policyholder. One of the things I think we tend to miss is, in many cases, is the agency side of the business. Agent is as important as the end customer, which is a policyholder. So keeping that customer experience just specific to what Raj was talking about, which was, having data points readily available to that agent, paying his commission, paying his or her commissions, statements to that, the status of where the application process is, so that he or she can talk to that end policyholder. I think those are all very critical points. And in some cases, we tend to focus on one side versus the other. And I think when we talk about customer experience, is that holistic view of what our business is all about, right? I mean, it is not just John Doe who's trying to buy a policy, but it's also about Jane Doe who's trying to sell a policy. And I think it's important that when we talk about solutions, that we don't ignore one side versus the other. We always have to keep both those factors in mind. I deal with customers on a regular basis, providing solutions, and the first complaint I get is I have an agent screaming at me because I don't know where his policy is or what happened within that process. And it is imperative for us to consider that, because the bread and butter of the business that we're in is to sell that policy and for that agent to sell that policy. So when we talk about the experience, you have to look at both sides of it and provide a balance between those two so that it is a full-fledged experience for that business. And it also creates brand loyalty. I mean, agents can go, independent IMOs will go and sell any policy out there. So why wouldn't you even broach that by giving an option for an alternative? So it is a highly competitive market. It's from a product perspective, you have these, again, when we come back to Vitality, John Hancock may have been the genesis of those types of lifestyle products, but I have clients today asking for those types of products, right? So yes, they may be in the forefront, but you have others that are following in that footstep, which means that they're also targeting the same demographics of policyholders and agents that want to sell that, not your traditional old, 10-year term or 20-year terms. There are more sophisticated products that require more nimble and more real-time data back to those sources so that they can make those educated decisions and they can stay and they are brand loyal to you at that point. So.
Excellent. Raj, maybe we can do a follow-up and talk a little bit about how technology can help to remove or reduce these frustrations that we see during the application process.
No, and technology is changing, and for all the folks that are here, you're going to hear about a lot of technology. So I probably do it a disservice on the next couple of days on the things that you're going to hear about how the different technologies do fit together between telematics, right? We just talked about recently about the John Hancock case around how telematics are used. Even on the PNC side, you have drones, you have IoT, you have blockchain. A lot of different things are helping in that process, but the one thing I would want to talk about is what do you do with this information, right? Because I think it's fair to say you guys are going to walk away this week understanding a lot of good technology that's out there, what it means, what it can do, and you're going to go back to your offices and say, well, I'm back to the same environments that I was always in. Like, what do I do with this? How do I actually make this thing work? So a couple things that I'd offer. Legacy system modernization is a big theme that is going through the industry right now. I think historically when people said that meant the $300 million projects that you have to make wholesale changes on. I think the world of technology is enabling this to do it for much cheaper and faster. That doesn't mean that you don't have to replace it, but what it means is you can encapsulate it and you can actually do things faster in the meantime. Microservices is a component that enables that. Cloud is a component that enables that. These are all things that everyone uses today, but how do you actually make that applicable is going to be critical to making all of these InsurTech capabilities we talk about a reality. Otherwise, they're just going to be cool gadgets that will just sit on kind of the wayside as you move forward with this. The other thing as we look at, we talked about omni-channel, right, as a key component to this. If you think about, when websites were first created, everyone wanted a www website, right? That was going to be the key mark to everything. Once I have that website, life was good. Fast forward to where we are right now. That's not good enough. You look at that and say, well, that's all fine and dandy, but what do I get out of this? It's got no capabilities, no functions, no self-service, all these things that were never contemplated. That's where we are in the omni-channel journey. Like we're at that point where we're saying, yeah, you need a mobile device. You need access to it, right? You need to be able to go through a website and do that. You need to be able to go to an agent. But how they're intertwined the expectation of our customers is starting to change drastically more than our industry is able to change with that. So you start to look at and say, unless we figure that out, customers are going to have their own expectation of what's going to happen and how that's going to work. And then the final thought I'd leave, and I'll open it up to the panel here, is I think there's going to be more ecosystem plays, especially when you look at technology. It's great we have life insurance products we have right now, but what about financial wellness? What about banking products? What about retail? The entry points are far vast reaching than we have right now. Before it was traditional. Go to an agent, buy life insurance, kind of, that's just the way it worked. But the channels that are coming in right now are starting to become broader and bigger, right? So how are you going to be able to hook into those from a technology perspective? So that's one thing I'd look at is to say there's a big trend that all of our industries are going through, and we have to solve for it.
Yeah, and Dan had flashed a stat out there about what happened last year, right? 86% was spent on digital technology in 2020. That was not the case 2 years ago. If you had asked anybody else, yes, the industry had always moved towards advancing towards digital, but not at the pace that we want. But we had a pandemic that actually forced companies to think outside the box. The real point, though, is the technology exists. The question we have to ask ourselves is why we continue to be restrictive in how we do business, right? I mean, so I'll take a simple example, a portal, self-service. We offer that to clients today. Policyholders can do some transactions against their policies, but we don't, as insurance companies, we are very risk averse. We want that control. We want that touch with that end consumer. So we restrict certain transactions to be actually pushed through from a self-service perspective. But we have data, we have the technology, we have the data that can actually take that fear away. We shouldn't be afraid of allowing someone to go into and transact a certain transaction within their policy, whether it is moving money, maybe taking out money, taking a loan, or doing a claims, right? So the P&C side has been so far advanced in this. They've gone from, you get into a fender bender with your car, it takes 6 to 8 weeks at some point. They brought that back down to a week, and now there are companies that actually, pay the claim the same day. You take a picture on your camera, you send it to the insurance carrier, and you have a check that is already deposited into your account. Why couldn't we do that on the LNA side? Why do we have to go through all these adjudications when a claim comes through? Why do we have to prove all that? Certainly there is a counter argument to it that you do want to adjudicate that, but at the same time, we cannot be completely restrictive because the companies that actually move forward are the ones that actually cater to those end policyholders and the agents for that matter, right? So we have to, again, I come back to this all the time. We cannot continue to try to maintain that control as much as we can, but we have to relax at some point, and we have the technology there to do it.
So I'm gonna pile on to that. Something Raj said jumped out at me, right? We're all here. This is going to be a pretty energizing event, right? ITC is always an energizing event. You leave with a ton of insights, and then you go back, and it's easy to fall into the old habits. I would say 3 things that are important for us to keep in mind as industry leaders to make sure that we continue to champion the promise of CX. Number 1 is culture, right? So Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I think it's easy for us to fall back into our repeated habits without leaning in hard on culture. I'll also say it's relatively straightforward to implement technology, right? And technology continues to progress. Processes are easy, but culture is the one that's going to be the make or break. And regardless of where an associate, an employee in your firm is, whether they're in the recesses of the back office, right, underwriting or IT operations or cybersecurity, or whether they're on the front lines and they're a CSR on the phone, every single individual across your value chain, across your corporate value chain, is responsible to champion the cause of customer experience. So that's number 1. Number 2, Raj talked about platform modernization. I can tell you, you are 100% correct, right? There's a significant amount of focus on modernization of all these back office legacy systems that we've accrued over decades across the industry. So That's the challenge with being a mature, established industry, right? We have some carriers that go back 175 years. So not only do you have these institutionalized processes that have been brought forward and mushroom and manifest themselves in systems, but we've had systems that haven't been replaced because they work. Why fix it, right? Let's focus on the quote strategic programs. And now they're a collective anvil and a burden around it's an albatross around our neck, right? We can't necessarily flourish and fly without shaking off some of these legacy systems. I'll give you an example. So starting in January of 2020, LIMRA and LOMA, we partnered with McKinsey & Company to do a task force on emerging technologies. So we had 3 subcommittees, we had 13 senior executives from across the industry as our champions, and we had about 52 business and technology leaders that worked together 12 to 14 months to surface some really insightful and actionable research. So that's available on limra.com under the Emerging Technology series. But what jumped out at us through that, just one data point, we fielded a survey on the way to the research. 54% of carriers reported that their billing systems were built in the 1990s, right? So predating Friends, predating Seinfeld. How do you provide a single customer bill when you have 4 different billing systems and all of them date back to the 1990s? I mean, that is the challenge that we're trying to fight against. The second thing I would add on that front with the Emerging Technology series is data and analytics. So look, everybody's been talking about artificial intelligence, AI at scale. I guarantee if you ask about 10 of me what AI means, you'll probably get 12 different responses, right? But AI at scale will be entrenched, will become a reality across our industry and ubiquitous sooner than we know it. The challenge isn't AI. Everybody's all in and bought into AI and machine learning, right? You peel back that layer, that first layer, the challenge is the underlying data, right? So good AI models plus bad data equals bad AI predictions, right? I urge all of us to make sure that we're looking at our data. How are we going to provide a hyper-personalized customer experience and customer journey to your customers without making sure that you have access to clean, secure, reliable data to be able to make those predictions? So 3 things: 1, data and analytics, AI, focus on the data strategy and governance, critical. Number 2 is making sure that you're paying down our technical debt, right? And number 3 is influencing our corporate cultures.
Excellent. So we're going to move into phase 3. So we've engaged our customer successfully. They have now purchased something. They have a policy. Service and claims, phase 3. Life insurance customer service has improved dramatically over the past few years, but for many consumers, the experience can still be uneven. It's not always possible to make simple changes to their policy in a quick and easy manner. So Satish, we're going to hand it over to you. What are you seeing amongst the life insurers you deal with in terms of those who have customer experience challenges around service versus success stories of those who have gotten it right?
That's a good question. You know, I truly believe there isn't a silver bullet out there that one piece of action that you can take to improve customer experience. I think the panel before Dan McCoach before this, and of course this panel talked about this in multitude, which is there's several factors that has to come together to gain that customer experience, from product strategy to technology to follow through, using the data appropriately. And the companies that use that and in the right balance are the ones that are in the forefront of customer experience. I think every company out there is marching towards customer experience. The question is, what is the degree of perfection that you're trying to achieve? The ones that do well are the ones that use all these different factors and put it into a perfect balance to achieve that customer experience. You know, I think last night at dinner, I was just speaking to a friend of mine, and you know, we were talking about 20 years ago. I mean, I'm sorry, not 20 years, probably 10 years ago. We were hiring, it's just an example I'll give you. We were hiring for an actuary. And we wanted somebody coming out of college, a fresh actuary, SOA, ASA coming out. And as the HR as my HR started looking at the background profile, we noticed that he had a video of being drunk and unruly, and scratched him off. The list just scratched him off, not without thinking about the other data points that he could have provided, right? I mean, we just centered that analysis is based on one data point, and rather than looking at the plethora of data points. I mean, and so it's important for us when we look at these different things that we're not, a single focused. We have to be multidimensional. We have to look at everything in front of us to provide the right decision in making those things. So the companies that do that are the ones that are really in the forefront. The others, they're managing, and the question really is, how do you improve that? And so certainly, the same factors: product, strategy, the changing your processes in terms of, I talked about process simplification, removing those restrictions that we have today that we have self-imposed on ourselves to maintain control or perceived control of things. I think we just need to start thinking about things a little differently, and we need to be relaxed, and we need to trust what we have in terms of technology to support that. And once you do that, I think you will see the companies that I deal with, and I deal with about 15, 20 companies in the US today, there's only a very few percentage of those that have achieved that goal. The rest are trying to achieve that goal. And the only way to do that is by using that balance across those different factors.
Raj, I got to tell you, and Satish, we promised Melanie when we convened, I think it was last week, that we're not going to talk about an Amazonian experience, right? But since Melanie's not here, but I think what you're talking about is thematically similar, right? Know your customer and provide that interaction and that experience that you have with these e-commerce websites. I mean, why wouldn't I, as a customer, expect that of my insurance company and my insurance provider, the same experience that I get, the ease of doing business, again, clicking a single button and magically 12 Amazon Prime boxes show up on my doorstep every single day, right? I think customers are so attuned to that experience, and they demand it.
Yeah, and I do want to add one other thing. With the data that we have available, you don't have to, the fear of losing touch with the agent force or agency force or with the policyholder doesn't have to be. I mean, you have the right data, you use the right data, you have the clicks that come through, you know what that agent or policyholder is doing on those policies. You can do the outreach. I mean, that is a connection. That outreach has to happen. So you don't completely rely on technology, you don't completely rely on data, you really, again, coming back to that balance, you have to use those things in the appropriate manner for us to achieve that end customer experience, and as we go through it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I'd add to the discussion is I'd say historically the contact centers have been more of a cost play, right? How do I make it more efficient, right? How do I get the customer in and out, right? Has kind of been the mindset. A lot of companies offshore a lot of the components and say I can bring down costs and bring it really to a point where it's applicable. I do think that the mindset is really now, how do I use it more of a competitive advantage, right? How do I get next best action in there? How do I actually figure out what it is that I want to drive out of the contact centers? Typically, why are people calling into contact centers, right? They're either trying to do something new or they have a claim, right? I mean, there's an issue. They're not just calling just because they're trying to be friendly, right? There's a reason they're calling. How do you take advantage of that? Because it's not something that happens on a frequent basis, but when it does happen, you need to be able to make sure that you can make sure you capture the right messages that you want from them. A question was asked previously about omni-channel. A lot of our clients struggle with it, not just with across channels, but within the channel, right? You look at it and they're like, oh, we have a mobile device so we could do that. But then there's 5 different units within the same company that send out the same messages to the same customer, right? There's no unified way to handle that. And so you start to look at it, and so omni-channel is not just across channels, it's within the channel and having a holistic picture of what the customer is going to experience. I'll tell you, I have insurance carriers that I have products with that still contact me about getting the same policy. It's like, I already have one, right? So it's like, well, how do you not know this? So you start to look at it and say, we have a lot of work to do on this front. We're in the industry and we see this. People who don't think about this day in, day out, how do you capture? That's the hearts and minds we have. I mean, the stat that we should all take away, and I think Dan had it, was what, 19 trillion of protection gap that's out there right now.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge number for us to capitalize on and really help what the market needs, right? You look at it and say, why do we need to do this? It kind of speaks for itself on the numbers that are out there right now.
And
Yeah, Limra Loma, sorry, Satish, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Karthik, sorry.
Thanks. We have partnered with our sibling trade associations, right, to make sure that we are covering the maximum number of Americans as possible, right? It's the Help Protect Our Families campaign. But I agree, the insurance gap is just unacceptable, right? Too many people are a paycheck or two away from financial ruin. And Rod, something you said about the way the industry has been doing digitization. Look, it was about 5-6 years ago when everybody got into digital transformation. They're like, yeah, we're all going to digitally transform. How do we know when we get there? We don't know, right? And we really actually have made a ton of strides. I give the industry credit. We're light years significantly ahead than we were. And I think COVID was just a catalyst, right? Digital transformation just skyrocketed. The use of digital technologies just skyrocketed because it just had to, right? I think the challenge with the digital transformation across our industry is we followed the same patterns that we do really, really well. We operate in silos. So when we did the digital transformation of our industry, we digitized claims, and we digitized underwriting, and then we digitized finance, and then actuarial, and then billing. How a customer doesn't care, right? From a customer's perspective, it needs to be one looser journey. So when we think about customer experience, right, what I've been urging our member companies, our industry, our carriers, that think about the journey of the customer and digitize from that perspective, not because you want to digitize one particular function of insurance. It needs to be across the entire value chain.
Yeah. The one other stat from Dan's presentation that actually resonated with me was the 44% of consumers actually get a knowledge about your product or services from friends and family. That is a staggering number, 44%. I mean, just think about it. So why wouldn't customer experience be in the forefront of everything that we do today? 44%. I think the next number, Dan, I don't know if Dan's still here, 33% comes from agents, and then the rest of it is, an educated consumer group that actually can, surf the web, find out. You have ratings on products, you have ratings on companies. So it is imperative for us to not to just ignore customer experience. I mean, or just be mediocre at customer experience. It is important for us to use every tool that's handed to us. It is to remove all those roadblocks and those restrictions that we impose on ourselves. It is all of those things that actually, result in the perfect customer experience. Is there a perfect customer experience? Maybe not, but at least we can try for perfection. And the only way we do that is by utilizing all of those tools that are in front of us.
Excellent. Well, thank you, panelists. I'm going to open it up to the room for questions. Anybody, I don't see any on the LinkedIn Live, but anybody in the audience question for our panelists here? Oh, we got one here in the front. For those of you that are new, please come to the Equisoft booth at booth 223, and we'd love to talk with you more.
Great panel discussion. Again, from the previous discussion and this, we've talked extensively about creating a culture within the insurance industry centered around customer experience. Any suggestions on best practices to create this culture in terms of measuring and reacting as an organization?
Well, I'll start. I think it is about hearts and minds, right? Would be my take. Changing culture is not easy, right? Especially when you look at the bigger companies, the more tenured companies that are out there. You have a sense of your own culture when you start to look at how the foundation has taken place. I do think as you start to look at the war on talent that's going to be in our industry and really trying to get the right mindset thinking out there, it comes from treating your employees as a customer, right? And I think that's the one thing that we've seen successful companies do is we've always had the debate, who's the customer? Is it the agent or is it the end customer? I think what's changed in recent is employees been added to that equation for this very reason, right? Because I think you can't just say we're going to change our culture today. You can get a new CEO, and to try to change that is going to be very difficult. You have to change from within, right? And so I think that's where we've seen most companies, successful companies, do this, is get ahead of that by having their employees at the forefront.
Yeah. Other questions here in the front?
So as with anything else, you're always faced with difficult choices, right? You got to decide where your priorities are going to be and what's going to end up moving the needle. We know that for multiple sets of transformational changes, you can work through outcomes that can be defined. You can work through ROI projections that could say, okay, I'm going to spend $100, I'm going to get back $300, makes sense to go there. But a lot of this is often experiences that are treated as potentially table stakes. And if you're not going to make it happen, then you're going to be in trouble. Many of them can potentially be measured later on, but at the stage that most companies are today, you can't really measure those benefits, right? And you tend to, as an organization who's out there to make profit, oscillate towards the side where you can say, look, here is where if I put my money where my mouth is, I know what I'm going to get back. And yet you then ignore the softer areas that are also important. How do you figure out the prioritization, and how do you make sure that you appropriately make the sort of decisions that need to be made?
So it's a challenging question to answer, because I think each company has its own little challenges, and you have to actually create a solution that is pertinent to that particular situation. Metrics, we measure the wrong things half the time. I mean, we have to look at metrics from a different angle for the most part. I mean, so, looking at where that complaints are coming from, that's certainly a strategy to look at. But I think we have to look broader than that. You have to look further than your current issues. You have to look at where you want to take the company, where you want to take your product, who are the end consumers that you're going to attract. Because if you really think about it, I mean, the age group of buyers today are in their 20s and 30s. They're not the folks that are my age and older, and I'm still young, by the way, is that, we have passed our time, and we have done what we had to do for our retirements and our lives. But the younger generation is a whole different, the way they look at things is very different. So why try to solve today's problem that is really a problem of our generation, but really look at how do you solve for the next 3 years, next 5 years? I mean, you have platforms, you have technology that lasts 10, 15 years. Why not utilize those, right? So certainly metrics are important today for customer experience, but I think we have to start also looking ahead of that, not just fixing these patchwork things that we do today, but really looking at it more in that longer term and seeing how we can reduce errors, how do we reduce those complaints with the different products that we have, with the different strategies that we take.
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because I think that we get this question a lot to say, well, how do you measure that? So I guess a couple examples that I look at. When Agile first came out, right? Everyone said you got to do continuous development, you got to implement. And the first question was, that's great, we need to do that. What's the end date? Right? Well, there is no end date, right? It's just like this is how it works, right? Then concept of innovation came out. We need to do innovation. Okay, what's the ROI? It's like, well, it doesn't work like that. So you start to look at the mindsets that the leadership are starting to have. Those are fundamentally not going to just go away. People are going to start thinking of end dates. They're going to start thinking of ROI. But what has started to shift is, to your point around table stakes. We're in a very laggard industry, right? We typically wait for someone to do something, and then someone else does it along the thing. Because someone else has it, let's do it, right? That's how we move along. We've kind of slowly inched along as we moved through the life cycle of the past century, even with insurance. But if you start to look at the incumbents that are coming, the new challenges that are coming, technology company wanting to sell, people wanting to self-insure, right? You start to look at the dynamics of the world. I do think leadership is starting to have a new mindset now, right? To say, you know what, it is a little bit more table stakes. Does that mean that everyone's going to get a free check to go do everything? No, right? But I do think, though, there's more leniency to having this discussion for the right idea, for the right thoughts, because I think there's more appetite because they recognize that something has to happen.
I think we might have time for one more question. Anybody in the audience? In the back?
Hi, thank you very much. Great presentation and discussion today. I had a question on the life insurance process onboarding. It's still pretty common to have laboratory tests done, APSs ordered, and that really radically changes the customer and agent experience. And quite honestly relates to a lot of not taken up rates. So when do you envision that process will be like a credit score underwriting coming through, and how long will that take to get there? And what are you gentlemen doing to kind of help move that forward?
Karthik, you want to take that? I don't know.
Yeah, happy to. So I'll just cite a really quick data point. Fluidless underwriting, automated underwriting, I think most organizations across the industry are doing some form of accelerated or automated underwriting, right? For a variety of reasons. One, operationally more efficient, right? Keep costs low. Two, from a customer experience point of view, what is the most intrusive part of the policy writing process, right? It is just these paramed exams. And number three, it's a generational thing, right? No one wants to do intrusive paramed exams anymore. So 2017 was the first time when LIMRA research revealed that companies are moving. I think it was about a 50, and don't quote me on this, right? It was about a 50-50 split on organizations that had implemented some level of automated and accelerated underwriting. That number jumped to about 62% in 2019. And it wasn't until 2020 when it's now a pretty solid majority, right? I think about 3/4. But also, it was also the emergence that we realized in our research where carriers are implementing and ingesting external data sources, right? So whether it's medical history, driving records, credit scores, whatever else. So and again, I don't have any specific evidence, but just anecdotally, the way that this has gone over the past 5 years, I think the current trajectory, this is going to be relatively commonplace in the next 3 to 5, right? Just based on the way the industry is trending, I think it's going to be critical for us to make sure we do that.
The one thing I'll add to that, though, is absolutely true. But I think, when you're talking medical information, that is a highly sensitive data that we're talking about. So when you're attaching a credit score to a human being, it has far-reaching consequences. So I think, in my opinion, just my personal opinion, I think it's going to be harder for us to get to a completely, a credit given based on your profile that can be shared. So with HIPAA laws out there, I think this is something that there's going to be a challenge for us to have a completely automated end-to-end, underwriting solution that happens just because we have those restrictions and that sensitive data that is out there. So it's certainly, I agree with Karthik. I think in the last, 12 to 24 months, I have seen clients go to more an automated underwriting with almost real time. I mean, you come in, you send the application, it goes to MIB, it comes back. You have the without a true actuary that's actually running the risk profile on it, based on those factors, issue the policy. But I don't know if we will, at least, I haven't come across a client today that wants to get to that profiling stage just because of those HIPAA laws and other things that come in the way of that, and just that sensitive data that we're dealing with. So.
Excellent. I think, was there one more question? I think we can squeeze in one more. Good participation, everybody. Gold star. Really appreciate the engagement. Go ahead, sir.
Appreciate it. So you did bring up that tracking the policy or transaction in the value chain is a common challenge across the board. Have we had any breakthroughs or any use cases that you can share?
I didn't actually hear that question. Can you repeat that again?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So tracking the policy or a transaction in the value chain has been a common challenge across the board. Have we made any breakthroughs, maybe, if not a complete solution, anything in piecemeal that you can share or talk about?
I have not. But,
Is the question, have we been able to track the policy from end to end? Is that
Correct. Like in a supply chain, you have RFID and you figure out where the item is, the examples that you were quoting. In a insurance industry, it's really hard to figure out where the application is, what status.
Oh.
That leads to a lot of rework or customer dissat to an extent. So I know you spoke about technology, but have you figured out a solution yet, or anything that you would like to share?
We have figured out, actually the technology exists, yes. I mean, anytime in the application process where that policy sits, whether it's an IGO status or NIGO status, what is missing, all of that is tracked today. The question though is really how are you using that technology, right? I mean, it's there. I mean, so if somebody's not going to take action on that, then it defeats the purpose of that. So it's true, you have e-applications, you have straight-through processing that goes through. It hits a bump in the road, missing signature or missing 1035 exchange on an annuity coming in, the money has not come in, the policy is not issued, agent is wondering where's my check for my commission, the policyholder is saying why isn't my policy issued, So that data exists today. The question is how quickly can you take that data and transform that and do that outreach that we talked about, right? So that outreach is it's a critical part of customer experience because before you have that call coming through either from the agent or the policyholder, you can reach out to their client. And it doesn't have to be voice. It can be an email. It can be another form of correspondence. All of that exists. The problem that we have is how we don't utilize some of those things today. And where it becomes more, gets backlogged because there are other things that are in the way of that. That is really where the challenge is. So when you start moving more towards a more seamless technology and more seamless things, I do believe that those types of things will go away. I mean, those types of issues will go away. But we do need to use that. I mean, we do need to take advantage of those things. And I think that is where the challenge is today. I don't know if the panel has.
The only thing I'd add is I think machine learning is probably the best case that I've seen that we've used. But we have not mastered it end to end to do that. It's been in pockets, right? And to Satish's point, how do you reduce the amount of volume and exceptions? I think we are getting better at that. So this is one where I think we just don't have enough data points to say that we can do it across the value chain. But I think that's where it's headed right now.
Excellent. Well, I think that wraps up our session right now. So thanks everybody for your participation. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much. We're going to do a quick turnaround, but stick around for session 3, Unlocking the Power of Data-Driven Customer Experience with another very seasoned set of panelists. So see you in a couple minutes. Thank you.
Great job, Valerie. Great job, guys. Thank you.
Thank Kartik. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kartik.
As well.
exploring the topic of unlocking the power of data-driven customer experience. We've assembled an expert group of analysts, data professionals, and carrier executives to discuss how to better leverage your data to drive CX that connects with customers in a digital-first world. Our speakers today are Doug McElhaney, partner at McKinsey & Company, Don McCoach, head of insurance, life and health at Celent, Don Nealand, senior vice president and corporate secretary of Better Life Insurance, Alan Doolin, global head of insurance solution consulting with Oracle, and lastly, Mike Ali, president of Universal Conversion Technologies. Gentlemen, good afternoon. I'd like to maybe take a minute to give further expand upon your background, please.
Sure. Dan McCoach. I gave the keynote, so you had a brief intro to me earlier. I'm the lead for the insurance practice at Celent for North America for our life, health, and annuity products. I'm fairly new with Celent. Started in February of this year. It's been a blast, having a fantastic time at it. Prior to Celent, I was the CIO for a PE-backed firm called Nassau Financial Group for about 5.5 years, and then most of my career, frankly, with PwC and other advisory firms, all of it in insurance prior to that experience. So happy to be here today.
Great, thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. Doug McElhaney. I'm a partner at McKinsey & Company in the insurance practice. Spend all of my time helping institutions that we serve develop AI-based solutions across the value chain. Work both in life and P&C. Also spend a lot of time helping my clients navigate and utilize the external data ecosystem. I've been doing this for the last 10 years. Prior to that, spent a lot of time at GE, working at the intersection of operations and technology.
Hello, everyone. Alan Doolin, Global Head of Solution Consulting for Oracle's insurance practice. Been in the industry for about 30 years. Spent a lot of time traveling the globe supporting a wide range of initiatives to support carriers in the public and private sector. Prior to Oracle, I was U.S. Director of Insurance for Microsoft. Was a VP at a carrier responsible for a lot of major transformational programs. And for the sake of today, I'm a founding member of MIT's Information Society of Chief Data Officers. And so there's a lot of insight that I've gained from that community. And last done some doctoral work with DAMA, which is, as you know, kind of the de facto standard and framework providers for data. So nice to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Ali. I'm the president of UCT, Universal Conversion Technologies. I've been in this role for about 4 years. And prior to that, I worked for insurance companies for most of my career and worked for large insurance companies and mid-sized carriers. And so just have a lot of experience. I always think it's interesting when I'm referred to as an expert. I think the thing I probably have the most expertise in is making a lot of mistakes in my career and recovering from it. And so hopefully you can identify with that as well. So it's good to be here today, share some of the experiences and where we see the current industry going and mistakes being made and how we overcome those in order to be better at what we're doing in the realm of customer experience today.
And I'm Don Nealand, Senior Vice President, Corporate Secretary of Better Life. I've got just about 40 years experience in the property casualty and life insurance industry, the last 36 with my current company, as well as being the head of IT. Over the years, I've been in charge of member service. I've been in charge of, in fact, I was HR, and also the community service and charitable activities side of our business.
Great, thank you, and thanks again, gentlemen. So let's get started. Recently, Equisoft commissioned Celent to conduct a research into how life insurance companies are harnessing the power of their data today. Dan, my first question is to you. What did the report, Getting Value from Your Data, reveal about the uses and benefits of data in creating great customer CX?
Good question. Thank you for the tee up. I believe there's a slide associated with that result. Is that will that be displayed? Because I'd like to interact with the audience around that slide. No? Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. Fantastic.
There you go.
So Thank you for the opportunity, and certainly it's a great honor to do research on your behalf. And let me ask the audience about this slide, which talks about the uses of data. Goodness, I have all kinds of interesting technical issues going on today. This device just fell off of me. With respect to the uses of data, the top 5 here are a use in pricing, a use in customer experience, which we just spoke about at length, call center service, customer insight, marketing. What strikes you about the top results here for the uses of data? Let me continue to be slightly provocative. And when we talked about engagement earlier, I asked the question, what is the killer app that the insurance industry needs to think about? And I make that point because one of the best ways to remove price insensitivity from consideration is to have a product so compelling, so interesting, that you make it a part of your daily life. So how many of us spent how much money when our child first asked us for an iPhone? Was price a consideration? No. The iPhone's features, its compelling platform, the experience was the reason why price was probably not in the consideration. So I find it interesting that pricing is the top use of the analytics output today. It certainly tells us something about our legacy habits. And again, I'm being provocative. I don't mean to be accusatory, but we need to think about the priority of the uses of our analytics. It's certainly good news that customer experience is ranked second, competing with call center and service, and customer insights. Those are squarely targeted at, I think, many of the topics that we're discussing today. But I would say that the first takeaway is we have a fairly traditional, very large consumption of the analytic output for the uses of data with respect to pricing, which all of us in this business know is all about where is my product positioned vis-a-vis the matrix of my competitors' considerations. And back to the Peloton example, if I'm concerned about that, am I talking about the parts of the stationary bike, or am I really focused on the experience of trying to think about?
Great. Thank you, Dan. Don, my next question is for you. What are some of the roadblocks life issuers commonly experience when trying to leverage their data to improve different parts of the customer journey? Maybe you can talk to us about what it's like from prospecting through underwriting all the way through services.
So a big item is a lot of legacy systems out there, old systems that need to be redone, the cost associated with that, and those systems touch all the realms of the customer experience. So you get leadership to commit to the dollars. Just look around the people at this conference. It's not like it was 5 years ago, where it was a lot more costly. There weren't pre-built products out there, the low code, no code kind of things that are available that make things easier in the end, and talent resources that go with that as far as talent on your staff. You don't have to go out and hire it because it's already there with somebody else, that if you can get it through a product at a reasonable price, that helps with that situation. The second situation is we have segregated, disparate systems. We've got data in a CRM system that doesn't integrate with the policy administration system. We've got departments using spreadsheets to perform some of their processes. It gives you inconsistent data. It gives you data that will cause a problem in the end when something in the CRM system, the agent looks at it and it's not the same as the policy administration system. They go to a client and the client says, well, that's not my right address. You have that address. Why do you have my old address? So that's a second. The largest one is, and this has been talked about, is it's the culture within organizations. We can commit to changing processes. We can commit to trying to make things better, but you've got to get staff buy-in for one. Somebody that's been there a long time and says this works just fine. They may act like they are going through the processes like they're supposed to, but doesn't necessarily always happen. This gentleman asked about, what can you do with that? Our new company has followed Ritz-Carlton in what they do. They created a set of service commitments, and the entire staff reviews one of those service commitments every morning at the beginning of the day. The entire company is reviewing the same commitment each day, and once you roll through, we have 18 of them. You start over and you continue and do that over and over again. And from an IT guy that's got an IT staff that you think, what are they going to think of this? How does this really affect me? It's actually worked better than I anticipated. We look at the other departments as our customers because they're the ones that we're servicing on a daily basis, and that's where our impact is.
Great insight. Thanks, Don. Gentlemen, would anybody else like to comment on some of the roadblocks?
Yeah, just an acknowledgement on some of the, I think, principles and fundamentals that I think either folks aren't aware of or that we're missing. The fact that we have access to tools, the fact that resources are less expensive than they have been in the past. There are core principles to enterprise data management that you can monitor or get the barometer on a company's maturity. And so one thing that I always ask is data a strategic asset? And if it's a strategic asset, does it have an executive aligned to that strategic asset, no different than a CFO? Is there an enterprise data management framework that you subscribe to? Dionbot, Gavraj. These are some of the core principles that you need in place to evolve your data management program. And then you see these high priority use cases, which have critical data assets that make up the use case. And those data assets live in different places, but there's proven frameworks that exist that can help an organization mature in data management, with CX being a high priority use case. But oftentimes the challenge comes where you forget about the core principles to mature your organization: governance, stewardship, quality, metadata management, architecture, analytics. So that's definitely something that I think needs to be top of mind, along with human capital change management. What framework will you use to evolve the organization?
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, we are at a technology conference, right? But Don, I love what you said about how you reinforce. Customer experience is more than just about the tech, right? Getting the organization together to talk through the aspects of what customer experience is and how to make it more successful, because there is still a human element of the touch points that we have, the interactions with our customers, which transcends just the tech and the data. But we should learn from those kinds of interactions and experiences that will help us to enrich and deepen the tech side when we go to create the kinds of experiences that will create winning service for an organization. So I think that's a really good additional way as we think about culture, we think about how we change and move towards the future. It's got to start with the people in our companies as well.
Good point, Mike. Thanks. My next question is directly to you, Mike. What do you think are some of the foundational practices life insurers should be employing in an effort to leverage their data as the true strategic assets for bettering end-to-end customer CX?
Yeah, that's one. Been a lot of discussion about that today. But when I think about, foundationally, many of what we think about in terms of data and linking that to customer experience is really, sometimes it's a nuance or an angle that many companies don't think of. When they think of chasing customer experience and the tech behind that, there's this idea that AI and machine learning and all this stuff takes the front stage, and maybe the data that really will create a depth and a richness to those experiences isn't always given equal thought process or equal intellectual capital in our organizations. And so I think it's It's good from that perspective. From a foundation, data has to be part of how we think about driving success through customer experience. And so what are some of the real basic building blocks of that? I mean, you already said it a little bit, Alan, but you think about governance, you think about aggregation. There's technology now that whether you're a startup and you've got almost no data to operate off of, I mean, you can get data, right? You can rent it, you can buy it, you can pay-per-view, if you will, so that you don't have to bring large data sets in-house and you care and feed and have the risk associated with all that. You can use it for whatever purpose through an API or something that's very transient rather than something that is resident inside of your organization. And so I think some of these concepts around data aggregation will help having a roadmap and a thought process around what does the experience dictate in terms of our need to have large data sets for companies that have very large volumes of data, like veteran carriers that have huge data assets. Those get interesting when you think about aggregation. They've got databases, they're carrying and feeding for a lot of information on a daily or nightly basis. Some of that data is replicated, not only in the databases they use for customer experience, but in policy admin systems, or in billing systems, or claims systems. And so the use and reuse of the same data within context can sometimes create challenges in an organization. So the right aggregation techniques will help a lot. So I think that's foundational. Then I would say data standardization is really important as well. Having common vernacular around how we in our organizations refer to data, how we scrub it and then store it so that it can be leveraged by these different tech pieces that deliver the kind of experiences we're talking about. Data normalization. So what do you do in terms of the actual storage of that data, how you care and feed for it moving forward in an organization, how you design it the right way. Kind of like I was saying earlier, sometimes you've got these large data assets and you've got large databases, but really you only need a transient piece of data, just real simply and lightweight to deliver a fantastic user experience, customer experience. So having that normalized idea and design and strategy is really important. So we talked about standardization, normalization, and then how could you forget data security, right? In the world that we live in, it's not just enough to think about the cyber world, but you've got, in the insurance world, you've got your privacy concerns, you've got your authorization concerns. Can you use that data really to help this person with the experience they're asking for? Do you have their authorization to use that? So there's a lot of, when you think about data security and authorization, there's a ton of considerations around that. So I guess when I think about, kind of how to summarize all that, the baseline is you have to have a set of skills and a set of disciplines that form the foundation of where you're going with the future of your data to create winning CX. And you have to do that with trained experts and with skill sets that probably don't exist in traditional insurance organizations. And then you think about even the conversation around customer experience itself and how you deliver that with technology. That is a very specialized set of skills as well. You can't just take Joe Engineer and make them a CX expert, right? And have them delivering world-class winning experiences. So I just think there's some real foundational, get the right skill sets, aggregate your data the right way, standardize it, normalize it, secure it. These are kind of it's almost like the duh part of how you care for and create this winning foundation. And it's really not the sexy part of CX, right? But it's very, very important that you create that kind of foundation to have the building blocks to operate on.
Yeah, elementary but important. Yeah. Anybody else like to comment? No? Okay. Many a question. Alan, In your opinion, what organizational roadblocks exist around becoming a data-driven life insurance organization?
Yeah, I think I've touched on some of the core principles. And again, the insights come from just my experience in working with global customers and also participating in MIT's Information Society, CDOs. I mean, we get together twice a year, and you hear the same themes. You know, number one, you know, you need some executive alignment to provide oversight for this strategic asset. And there's success with top-down approaches where, you know, a CDO is aligned with a C-level executive in a business unit, and then programs get deployed that way. But then at times you need to take a bottoms-up approach where you provide the use cases and that business case to get that endorsed leader. But at some point there needs to be an executive endorsed leader to be a steward over the asset. Number two, you know, you would never build a multi-million-dollar, you know, facility without a blueprint. I can't emphasize this enough, there are proven data management practices and frameworks that companies should subscribe to. Making this up on the fly is just, it's never a successful end. Again, DAMA is a good example of data governance. It has all these core principles in place. And analytics is always the end goal. In many cases, you hear AI and analytics. You know, AI to me is a high priority use case, and analytics is the result of all these streams that have to be in place. And so when you think about governance and stewardship and data quality, you're doing that either through a solution or an individual. You know, I recall a large effort with the large carrier, the CFO and the actuaries. That was the high priority use case for this tier one carrier. And I think we did a good job of assessing the core systems to find the high priority use cases, and then the data that supported the high priority use cases. And then it was all about providing data assets, timely, quality, to the enterprise so they can evolve as an organization. And so two is just that core enterprise data management framework. And then, you know, three is, you know, how are you going to measure success? You know, what is the business case? What is the ROI as you deploy your data assets and you're successfully achieving the use cases? They have to be meaningful to the organization, right? And so I think some of those core principles have to be in place if you want to evolve your organization. And then as you look at the other investments that you make with technology, you do need technology to support your vision. You know, whether it be, you know, the AIs of the world, configurable systems that are in the cloud, but, you know, those become an important decision as you evolve your entire framework. But those are the core principles, I think. If you don't have those, then I think you're going to run into some challenges at your organization.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
Any other input, gentlemen?
I think I would generally agree. You know, we see a lot of situations where data really isn't owned by anybody. And so it's great to have a sponsor, but you need also that next level of real ownership. And we find a lot of situations where if you ask, it's a little bit of everybody owns everything, so nobody really owns anything. So having the hard conversation, especially as data and data streams cross over boundaries, having the hard conversation around who legitimately is going to own this. Because, by the way, it shouldn't be IT. IT owns stability, they own performance, they own availability. They don't own the data. Because it has to be somebody who actually understands, is this data accurate? Is this right? And, you know, usually the only people that know that are deep in the functions that work with it every day. So it can cause a lot of tension whenever you basically tell the IT team or ask the IT team, can you provide some semblance of authority and decision rights on the data to this group of individuals that sit outside of IT? And that can be challenging from a technology standpoint, but really is the direction most organizations need to go.
I agree.
And that point, not that long ago, our company, IT, led the projects. And we moved it out of the department into the department requesting the system, the project. my staff knows that their support for them. My staff is there to ask them the right questions. Okay, does this data help you any? Okay, what else can we provide you? Here's something we have, does this fit in? And help lead them down the path, but they're the ones that make the ultimate decisions and actually drive the projects. That's great.
Great prelude to my next question. Doug, do you mind spending some time sharing your thoughts as to the processes and technologies that are critical to realizing the full potential of a customer's, of a life insurer's data?
I think of three things around this, and I'll describe them in the order of easy to hard. One is just generally using technology to unlock data, whether that's NLP and OCR technology to get stuff that's buried in text-based information out and get it a little bit more organized and structured. That can be a big lift. Technology that can connect data so that you don't have to move it. That's another one. Technology that can build bridges between organizations. What we call, we just released an article a couple days ago, what we call trust architecture, so that these institutions that have data that could be helpful can make it accessible while still applying by different trust regulations and data privacy regulations. So there's a lot of technology, even something simple like an automated tool that can do data imputation, where you've got missing data elements within a core data set. Those things can provide a reasonably big lift to make that asset more useful and valuable. The next piece of it I think about is strategy. And, we think about that word and it's big, but I always ask the question, do you have a business strategy? Of course, everybody's got a business strategy. Do you have a data strategy? Often they say yes, they have a data strategy. And then I ask the tough question, what's the relationship between the data strategy and the business strategy? And often there's an uncomfortable silence at that point, because you have two different parts of the organization actively working on these big strategies and haven't really done the work to bring them together. I'm working with a client right now on this particular effort, and it's been a multi-month journey to try to get these things to actually speak to one another and coexist in a way that makes sense. So, and then there are sort of technology elements of strategy. If you haven't looked or looked at this, knowledge graphs are a tremendous way to provide visibility to data in net new ways that are very easy for those folks that aren't close to the data to understand. What is it, and how is that data connected to other data that could be useful? These are really powerful tools, and thankfully the technology has caught up to make it more accessible. So that's another one. Then they have the third one. I'm a McKinsey person, so everything is in threes. Ownership, which I just mentioned. This is all well and good to bring technology to bear, to have a strategy, but at the end of the day, you need legitimate, accountable ownership of that data. And this is really where we find a lot of it falls apart. You can build the strategy, you can bring technology in, but somebody's got to raise their hand and say, yes, I own lock, stock, and barrel customer data, even though some of it might exist outside of what I directly own from a platform, technology, or process standpoint. I own policy data. And so you inherit the accountability for its accuracy, its availability, which is a tough thing, because typically that's defaulted to the IT organization. So really having, again, the open and honest conversation amongst leadership, because everybody will acknowledge this is a tremendous asset for us, but you got to take the next step to say, great, if it's an asset, who's going to invest time and energy to make it an asset and a productive asset for us?
Agree. Important could be dangerous, right? Any other comments or thoughts? No? Okay, Don. Having recently completed a data migration project at your organization, can you spend a few minutes with the audience sharing about your thoughts, experiences? What would you do? What would you not do?
So this was Better Life was a combination of two small life insurance companies, and together we're still a small life insurance company. We're just bigger. Okay? So neither company really had the talent, the expertise we needed to do this. So the first thing we did was we looked for a partner, and we found one in UCT, Mike and Chris. And I got to give kudos to Chris and his team. We completed the conversion in 10 months. And as Chris will joke, but we almost killed 2 people. But it was eye-opening for me, being at the company 36 years, being in IT. We had a homegrown system started in 1982 on an IBM I-Series, which I love the I-Series, but there's challenges with that platform. But so I thought I knew our data pretty well, and for the most part, I did. But you find out there's a lot of things that you really thought you knew that you don't, and we found out in a hurry that we needed to have. And this, you may say, well, that only makes sense, but it's imperative. You got to have the right people in the right seats when you do this. You need to have, when one office was being closed, and we were staff not moving to the new company, you need to make sure you keep the staff on as long as you need them for the right reasons. People that know the systems. We had to dig into code and programs, because some people were let go without knowing what we really might need them for. And we had documentation, but when it's books and books and books and Word documents on top of Word documents on top of Word documents, finding what you need in that documentation isn't that simple. So we had the staff that have been on that system a long time, that knew the system, how it worked. We went and we dug out data. We dug out code, formulas, that kind of thing. So if anybody is thinking about going through that, make sure you got the right people in the right seats. And that starts off with a good project manager. If you don't have a project manager, the scope of this project will kill you. And we're fortunate, the company that we merged in with has a really good one, and he drove everything. I told him on numerous occasions, he'd only been in the life insurance industry for 2 years, and I was surprised as to how quickly he learned products and learned the ins and outs of the products and how they work within the system, for not having an IT background or not having a life insurance background. So I was quite impressed with him, and he did wonders for us. So a couple other points I'd just like to make is that, how does this relate to the customer experience? You got to make this as seamless as possible. You might not have a merger like we did, but you might be converting systems. The first thing you can do is not do it right and have a bunch of upset customers. So you got to make it seamless. We are a not-for-profit life insurance company. There's a section in the fraternal or the IRS code for us called the Fraternal Benefit Society, and we know our members really well. We're member-owned, so we have an aging membership. And one of the things that we talked a lot about and spent a lot of time is in this conversion, we had premiums that were off by a penny or two. And what are we going to do with that? Right. We knew that these elderly people, why are you charging me 1 penny more? You think about it, penny is nothing. Why are you charging me 1 penny more? Why are you charging me 2 pennies more or a penny less? This is different than it's always been for 50 years. And we have a lot of 50-year members. We have a lot of 75-year members, and we recognize them for that, for their loyalty. So what we did is we knew there'd be problems in the new system we were going to, because it wants things to be exact. But we didn't want to get those calls from the customer, because what's going to happen? The more calls we get, the less work that can be done in the member service department when it needs to be done. So that was one of the biggest issues that we came across, that we took a lot of time to figure out how we wanted to do that. But knowing your customer, knowing your member, made all the difference in the world with that. And then in Dan's, the last comment I'd make is that in Dan's first talk, when he talked about engagement, somebody asked about engagement versus experience. being member-owned and having members as long as they've been, we know our members pretty well. We have engagement programs already in place for them to do our community service and charitable things. So we already have an engagement with them, okay? What I'm curious to see is we're starting a digital transformation, and I'm curious now to see after Dan how that relates to their experience when we make more things online. We're older, we know we need to get younger, so we're looking at the omni-channel distribution. We want to do business with them how they want to do business. And it has to be easy. And those are the two key points that we consider every time we talk about anything. Is it easier to do business with us? Is it how they want to do business? And by doing that, I'm curious to see if that affects our engagement on the other side of the business, where we're doing our community service and charitable activities.
Great, thank you. And it's been a privilege to work with you and your team. It was a very rewarding project. With that being said, having had the opportunity, the privileges to go through a conversion, having had the experiences we had today, some of the intel that we were able to glean, any advice that you would give to any industry leaders at the moment?
Yeah. So I already talked about the right people in the right seat. That's imperative. That's the biggest. The one thing that we didn't do well enough is that we didn't consider post-conversion issues. We knew we'd have some, like this premium thing, but we didn't dedicate enough time afterwards to address those and get those things cleaned up. We are in our second month of doing that. We're down to probably 20 issues. There's only one that's of any significance. So that would be probably the two biggest pieces of advice I'd give.
Thank you. For the rest of the panel, I'm going to ask you guys a very similar question, right? And Doug, we'll start with you. So if you can give one piece of advice to a life insurance executive seeking to utilize their data to improve the customer experience, what would that be?
Gosh. When I think about customer experience, especially in the kind of confluence of technology and data, I think I would say embrace the messiness. It is a part of the process or part of the experience just generally in interacting with an insurance company, where if you think about it from a developmental standpoint, it's constantly moving target. You're thinking about using maybe data that you didn't use before, maybe some external data. You might have to introduce concepts like A/B testing to get the experience right. It's a very messy process. And by the way, when you think you've nailed it, the customer demands and the customer needs shift again. So really it's about just being okay with, hey, we're going to try to get it right. We're going to get feedback on it, and we're going to keep our eyes to the future so that we can evolve and sort of roll with how this is going to unfold over the next couple of years. If anything's true right now when it comes to customer experience and just general customer interactions, it's constantly changing, and it's accelerating in its nature of change. So you've really just got to embrace the messiness.
Dan, Alan, how?
Yeah, I mean, I think about some of the high priority use cases that we see with CX that's driving business, and this whole concept of data asset development that feeds these high priority use cases. My advice would be, make sure you're selecting solutions and technologies that align to your trajectory. Nothing's worse than putting a great strategy in place and great people in place, but adopting legacy systems to support this trajectory that can't fulfill the promise. And there's some very good platforms out there that have been architected to help you with that data asset development journey that maybe removes the need for you to do data quality. Rules-based solutions can really give you data assets that have the quality component to it that delivers, as you're on your journey. So be very selective about the platforms, the roadmap of the platforms, and again, are they on the same trajectory as you? Can they support your future? So,
Dan?
I would say, I'll try to make this a fairly straightforward example. Understanding, and I talked earlier in the day about strategy and the company's strategy and how important that is from a value proposition perspective, and therefore, what a digital platform needs to provision to provide that value. I would look at the gap between what is the articulated strategy and what's missing in the data that's required to enable that strategy. And this does not have to be rocket science. If a big part of the strategy is ease of doing business, a natural question is, well, what do we know about the accuracy of email addresses or cell phone numbers in our current customer data file? And I'm guessing that there's an extraordinary level of inaccuracy with respect to basic digital reach assets that you should have a handle on in order to enable a strategy. And so usually that's a fairly straightforward example of how you can turn the strategic requirements into incremental steps to improve the asset, the value of the asset that should be in your data.
Mike, having had the privilege of both coming from the issuer side and on the provider side, any recommendations for the audience?
Well, I think you guys have all said it pretty well, and I guess I would put my layman's view on that, and I would say embrace the future and don't just let it happen to you, right? So, I mean, you can fall into strategy, you can fall into some of these practices around disciplines, around data, but it doesn't create the kind of winning success story that really will propel you and your organizations forward. So do it thoughtfully, do it intentionally, put energy behind where you're going for the future. It's a great career path for you and your career, and it's exciting work to do this kind of things at the cusp of where insurance companies really need to change and transform. And their customers are saying, give it to us. I mean, most life insurance companies have customers that have expectations set by many other winning experience platforms. And so then they come to ours as a life insurance company and they look at our platform and the kind of experience, it's been shaped by everything else that the expectation has been moved forward. And so in a way we're playing catch up. So I would say, like Doug said, it's going to be messy, but embrace that and just charge ahead and do good work out there. So that would be mine.
Great, thank you. Great, and thank you everybody for your for tremendously insightful discussions. I hope everybody appreciated it. We do have, it looks like, a couple minutes for question and answer from the audience. Before we do that, though, a reminder again, please feel free to stop by Equisoft's booth number 223 and that of UCT booth number 902 to discuss any of the questions or topics that you heard from today. Anything related to your digital transformation journeys, we're happy to have the discussions with you. We'll go ahead and open up the questions to the audience.
Register for the Montreal, the Grand Prix at our booth. So if you want to win that trip.
Thanks. Hi. Thanks for your time today, guys. My question is really around the data ownership piece that you talked about. Moving that or decentralizing that, taking it out of IT, what does that practically look like? Do you have data analysts that are in your claims or policy or different groups, or is it training those departments to understand things like SQL and programs like that? How do you practically decentralize your data ownership?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish there were a super clean answer, but unfortunately there's not. There are certainly roles that can be introduced that can help. So you think of a role we call a data steward, which is somebody that sits directly within the function. They are very close to the data because they have experience with it, they have knowledge of it, so they know what good looks like. They may or may not have some technical skills such that they can actually go in and manipulate the data. More often than not, we find success in pairing that person up with somebody within technology that does have those, administrative and update rights so that they can fix things. It's really a negotiation with technology in IT. If they are comfortable because they know somebody, I remember a colleague I had at GE who was the guru on all things related to our operational and finance data. And so over time, IT gave him more and more authority to go in and actually update things because they knew and trusted him. But you might start with, introducing the notion of a data steward to say, hey, you're empowered by your function to bring issues to light when you find accuracy or other challenges. connect to this person from IT who's going to be your partner and sort that out. And then that might get elevated so that you have a continuing and growing ownership on that. So it's a sort of an organic process, but typically we see that start by identifying an individual who's going to become the functional data steward.
And if I could just maybe add to that, Doug, is create a forum where that kind of discussion can take place. That may seem like basic 101 stuff, but sometimes what we do is we hand somebody a responsibility and we say, okay, go do this. Mm-hmm. And they don't rub shoulders with the right people to get to the right level of detail that really adds value into these processes that we're talking about. And so I think it's important as you think about carving up some of these responsibilities that you put them shoulder to shoulder with people that understand these techniques, but then that person understands the data, and there's a really good marriage of that. So create forums where those people can interact. Even though they may not speak the same language to start with, just get through that, and it becomes a really good partnership.
Thanks. So, in our hurry, especially in the insurance industry, to play catch up with other industries through a transformation agenda, we might often find ourselves in a situation where there's so much of a focus on putting the foundational capabilities into place that you've got whole towns coming up with, an equivalent of homes with a lot of foundations, but there are no homes on top of them, right? So you've got data lakes where you spend millions on with no data, right? Producer marketing capabilities with no actual utilization, right? The whole challenge of saying, how do we do this in a manner in which there are bite-sized chunks that we continue to deliver through while we continue to put in more foundations, right? Rather than, let's first get all the foundations ready, right? Data team needs it, marketing team needs it, IT team needs it, distribution team needs it, and everybody's going after the foundational capabilities first. And you put all that money up front, but then the actual value clawback that you need to be able to get, we tend to say, don't worry, it'll come. But, it takes longer than that.
Yeah, I'd love to make a comment. I mean, what you just mentioned was the old-fashioned waterfall approach, and I'm not sure we have the tolerance for a return on capital that's 5-6 years out. And so some of the best practices that we hear in the industry is, in the best case scenario, you identify the departments that you believe have the high priority use cases, quantifiable use cases. And then there's this natural evolution of what data supports it. And then as you evolve on delivering the data asset, you will naturally mature across those core principles: governance, stewardship, quality, analytics. And you almost benchmark yourself for where you are today, where you want to be. You have your use cases, and you're developing data assets. You're iterating data assets, 100 per quarter, 20 per quarter, and those data assets become reusable because you know the source, you know who needs them. And that's a way that I've seen people mature in data management, but you're crossing the streams, your stewards are getting together, they're making decisions as a team, you're making decisions on technology that supports the use cases, and you're getting an ROI, based on that strategy that you set when you identify the use cases. And so I think there's a happy medium in giving the business an asset that has a return and maturing the organization. And you'll grow. I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone kind of build a perfect strategy and then deploy perfectly. So the more successful projects have come kind of that way. And getting the sponsorship is key. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. So,
yeah, involvement from the business, I think, is key because they will keep the technologists accountable, right? So building a foundation that no one's using, no one's building a house on it. Well, that's what our business sponsors do. Is they're the ones that take that and create the vision for the customer experience. There's already an experience that's being delivered by the organization. So how do you take what you've got, and then how do you deliver better plus one?
The only thing I would add there is, for me, in the context of what you describe, enable is a 4-letter word. If you hear somebody say, oh, this is going to enable, I don't believe it, first of all. I just don't believe it. And if you are going to enable it, when am I going to see it? Is it going to be next year? Is it going to be 2 years? So that's always a red flag for me when I see that on a page. Or I think the other one, too, is I really enjoy having conversations with my clients around the customer 360. I have a lot of fun with that one because my usual response is, what could you do with a customer 197? Because right now you're operating on a customer 30. So that would be 6 times greater than what you have today.
I like that.
Interesting.
So just trying to shift the mindset to if we were incrementally better, so if my data was more accurate with what I already have, and I added incrementally more, what use cases could I march out on in the next, say, 4 months? What marketing campaigns could I improve, and so on, to show? Because the reality is, if you can prove value, you'll get more leeway and more runway to move faster. So that's what you should focus on, not, okay, yes, we recognize we need the foundation, but can we do it in an agile way over time and getting value incrementally along the way?
Any other questions from the audience? No, we've got time for one more. Okay, great. Hey, can we have a round of applause, please, for our panelists? Thank you, gentlemen. Great, and thank you, everybody, for your participation. Please feel free to join us for cocktails right beside. Thank you again for everybody's attendance. Any questions, please feel free to see any of our panelists or join us at the booth. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the conference and everybody be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.